Hello, my name is Jim Tepper, Director of Products and Marketing at EtherWAN Americas. Today we're talking about PoE. I know what you're thinking, not another PoE presentation, but this one's different. This presentation is going to focus a little bit more on how your company will evolve because of PoE. We'll talk a little bit about the risk for your businesses if you don't embrace these changes that are inevitable and coming up with the newer generation of PoE devices. The future marketability of your expert skill sets if you are an employee of a company that does PoE solutions, your future job prospects in that same kind of company, and where to learn more about PoE. Let's jump right into it, shall we? If you look back into history, at least from the US side, there was a big fight between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. And there was an age-old debate whether AC or DC was the way to go. And I think we all know the direction it went. AC was the winner. Now, if you look at our house today, you might start to think again, was AC really the winner? Is it the predominant type of power that's used today in our own homes? How many wall adapters are we using? What about USB? Almost everything has some sort of AC to DC transformer in your house nowadays. Now, there are a few exceptions, of course, but in general, you'll see most devices are DC. So it makes you think, is DC really the way to go? Now you start to think about, okay, let's talk about power over Ethernet, which is DC, and how it's up and coming in the marketplace today. Now, we've all heard about IP convergence. It's been happening for decades, really. It started with, IP telephony, voice over IP type of things. It moved into IP cameras and then building management systems. And now it's all starting to move into PoE lighting. So if you look at the global market forecast for PoE in general, not lighting, but just PoE, you can see the trends over time. You look at the older technology, 802.3 AF, that was the lower power stuff, 15 watts. And you can start to see it over time decrease in popularity. The 802.3 AT, which is the 30 watt variety, has been steadily increasing year over year and continues to do so. But now that PoE with BT, or 90 watts, is available, you start to see a strong entrance of this technology into the market and an accelerated adoption pace for this technology because it can power more devices than ever before. So let's look at building infrastructure, kind of the next to last trend in PoE and IP convergence technology. You've got security and surveillance, access control, HVAC, lighting, water, and fire alarm panels, all connected to the Ethernet now. So the question is, can we make it easier? Can we connect those things via PoE instead of a separate outlet and make things more efficient and faster? So let's look at the PoE market. The big growth potential in PoE is lighting, that latest trend that we talked about earlier. On a global scale, especially in APAC, you're seeing a 35% CAGR, or increase year over year, of adoption of PoE lighting and the PoE market in general too. So there's a huge potential in lighting coming up. And if you can imagine every single light being connected to an Ethernet jack, all of a sudden the prospects of Ethernet and PoE become very, very attractive. In fact, one might even say disruptive. Let's look at the market potential for 802.3 BT, which is the new 90 watt standard for PoE. 90 watt is optimal for supporting almost all kinds of luminaires. Almost any kind of light can be supported by up to 90 watts of power. The vast majority. Now, certainly there are higher power lights out there or specialty applications that need more power, in which case PoE is not the choice. But for 90%, we'll call it 80% of all installations, we've got coverage with PoE technologies. If you look again a little closer into the lighting market, PoE is a big driver for lighting, and lighting is a big driver for PoE. So they definitely feed off of each other as we move forward. Smart lights must be connected to the Ethernet in some way. If you want to schedule service or you want to coordinate lighting schemes, there needs to be some sort of control for these lights. Why isn't that part of the network today? The answer is it's becoming that way. Providing power and data or connectivity or control over PoE and over the network is a huge benefit in time and cost. Why PoE for LED lights? Let's look at some of the trends in the industry. We have 23% of all power being used by commercial buildings. And in those commercial buildings, 40% of the energy is committed to just keeping the lights on. We have 20% efficiency year over year being gained by LED lights, and a 12% decrease in price year over year for LED lighting. So you put this all together and you start to see, wow, there is kind of a nice trend here. Commercial buildings are moving towards LED lighting. In fact, it's a 50% share approximately now this year, 2021, for LED lights versus other. You put it all together, you're seeing lower prices, higher efficiency, higher adoption. It starts to make a lot of sense. But LED lights, they can be powered on DC. So should we be leveraging PoE for these LED lights? And why would we want to do that? What's the benefit? Outside of just standard efficiency, we can do that with a regular AC outlet and produce LED lights. But if you look at the amount of cost it takes with this chart here, armored wire versus category 6 wire, the cost is tremendously different. You're looking at 80 cents to $1 per foot, or $3 per meter armored wire. Whereas, you're 30 cents per meter for Cat 6. A huge difference in price. If you look at the availability of it, it's ubiquitous. You can get category 6 cable anywhere. Even your local convenience store has category 6 cables nowadays. And it is very, very safe because it is low voltage wiring. And because it's low voltage wiring, it might actually allow you to use different types of workers to install it. And those workers may be less expensive than a worker that is certified to work on AC power. And then look at the difference in install. A picture says 1,000 words. Here you can see all the conduit, the rigid pipe that's used to house AC power. That same amount of AC power can be achieved for lighting with the picture on the right, bundles of Cat 6. It's very cool. A whole new way of doing things, a whole new way of looking at running power to lighting a building. So, PoE lighting, what's the difference? Well, it comes down to the time to install, the level of electrician status you need to use in your buildings, the cost of materials, and of course the space required. Lots of benefits to going with PoE lighting. But don't forget about power efficiency. So outside of all the installation and total cost of ownership, the power itself is more efficient. So when you use LED lights and you're using PoE to power them, you're saving power, you're saving money. Less transformers equals more efficiency. You can lower the cost of lighting in general, which remember is 40% of a commercial building's total cost. It's easier to achieve green certifications. Here in the US, LEED is one of them, and there are many others. Every single house in this contest we had here in the US called the Solar Decathlon, every house utilized LEDs and PoE to achieve maximum energy efficiency in the newest concept homes that were showcased for the Department of Energy. So, what does this mean for you and or your customers? If you're a business owner or an executive at a company that deals with data or lighting, you might have to redefine the roles of your current employees. For instance, a datacom employee might now be helping to install lighting because that light is now attached to a Category 6 Ethernet cable, which is controlled by data and powered over PoE. So who's going to install the PoE lighting? What additional training do they need? Does a datacom person need training on lighting fixtures? Or maybe the other way around, does a lighting fixture guy need training on PoE and technology for data? So how can deploying PoE for building automation and lighting affect your profitability as a business owner? Well, remember, it's lower cost of material. It has a faster amount of time for install. And then, of course, the cost of the electrical qualifications for these employees is lower because it's low voltage. So what about the installers? The guys that go out there and install these lighting fixtures? Again, datacom guys might need to learn about lighting fixtures. They need to understand how PoE switches work if they don't already, and how that relates to PoE lighting. You might have to put a switch in the ceiling. You might have to put one in places you've never had to before. And that might be a good reason to start thinking about using hardened PoE switches. You'll have to really expand your application reach, a little bit more knowledge about how it all goes together. The same thing with electricians. The electricians now, instead of just plain AC, they're going to need to learn a little bit more about data, how it flows, how it works. What's a PoE switch? How does it work? Why do I need it? How does that relate to the lights I'm putting in? Learn about IP-based centralized control systems, because that's how you might control all the lighting in a building, which traditionally anything that's centrally controlled like that might fall under the datacom guys. And then expand your application reach once again. But another category that's interesting is the architects or the engineers, the guys that are coming up with the newer concepts and the build type of specs that you might see in new buildings. They're going to need to learn about this technology because it offers a lot of flexibility and new ways of lighting, new places you can put lights where you couldn't before. It's an opportunity to use redundant DC power supplies. But of course, more than anything, you can integrate cost savings. And so you can add value as an architect by specifying newer technologies that use less power and are basically lower in price for install. All right, so let's put it all together and summarize this. PoE is increasing in popularity in general within building automation, building infrastructure, and other places, of course. Well, lighting is the next big boom for PoE. It is starting to happen now. But it's not the only thing that PoE is good for, of course. PoE systems are very power efficient, allows you for power and control over the devices that you're connecting. And it will cause business models to shift. So if your current customer or partner is involved in any of these industries, it's something to talk to them about. What are your plans for PoE? How is it changing your business? How are you going to adapt to stay on top? So of course you can learn more about PoE by visiting EtherWAN Academy. Plenty of opportunities there to learn a little bit more about the details of PoE, how it works, where I can use it, and how you can get more educated. And in addition, we have a podcast we'd love for you to listen to that goes into more detail about PoE. So I'll close with this. Nikola Tesla said, "Someday I'll harness that power," and I think someday is today. Because surprisingly enough, we've moved from AC to DC, and PoE lighting is the next generation of power, and that is DC. So with that, thank you very much. And please look for all of the different devices within EtherWAN that can help you with your PoE needs. Thank you.